What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Hope Shot. Hope everybody is having a great week, and hope you guys are. Oh, yeah, I already did that. So if you guys just jumping on, say what's up. Let us know you're here. Don't be shy. I say that every time because I don't want anybody to be shy. Don't be shy to this guy. Hey, Christina, remember that time last week when I had you do that one thing and you read it really well?
Yeah, the clarity statement.
Yeah.
Oh, did you send it to me?
Not this time, but last time. Oh man.
I know.
Luckily we don't text each other that much.
I know, right? Yeah, you just don't waste any time. You just call.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, I got it right here.
Hey, we need some backup music for the clarity statement. Ready?
All right. The Hope Shot clarity statement. We here at the Hope Shot are a group of people in recovery spreading inspiration. We come from all different walks of life and pathways of recovery. Our verbiage may be different at times, but we all have one thing in common: recovery. As a lifestyle, we support all pathways of recovery. It doesn't matter how you get from A to Z, just get there. Thank you for being a part of our family, the Hope Shot.
It almost went. Did really well. All right, I'm gonna stop playing around. Man, we have a great story for you guys tonight. And let's see, we got Tiffany. What's up, Tiffany?
What's up?
And then we got Sky coming in with the cusp. What's up, Sky? Good to see you. Glad you're here. So yeah, if you want to go ahead and introduce our guest, Christina.
Yeah, absolutely. So I met Trish a few years ago. We actually participate in service together at a Florida region level. And she has an amazing story. Every time I see her, she's got a smile on her face. She's positive. I just love everything about her. I remember the first time I heard a little bit about her story, I was just blown away. You know, we have these things happen to us that brings us to this point in our lives. And when we join these fellowships and we get to, hear other people's stories, we almost forget that a lot of us have had some shit happen to us. You know what I mean? That we had to get through. And, man, she's got one of those stories, and she's doing the damn thing. She's does service. She's all about service. And yeah, she's amazing.
All right.
Here's Trisha.
What's up, Trish?
Hello.
Hey, Trisha.
You're gonna make me cry, Christina. We just started. Love you.
Oh, love you too, girl.
Oh, wait. Oh, let me get there. Oh, not me. Dang it. Hold on. There we go. All right. Let me put you on the big screen. There we go.
All right, girl, you're up.
Okay. Well, thanks, guys. I love you guys so much. Love being a part of the journey. Love that you guys let me come and share my story. I kind of had a funky day. I was like, okay, I planned my day at the beginning. I was like, I'm going to take my breaks at work in the quiet time, and I'm going to meditate and make sure I'm in the right space of mind. But it was, life on life's terms. It was like, go, 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 go. So, one thing I really, in learning more about the Hope Shot is understanding that no matter what path we take, either before we get to recovery or after we get to recovery, some of the unique things that happen to us, like Christina said, some of the things that have happened in my life seem so unique, but something that we all share, the commonalities that we have, is the feelings, right? All the shame and the guilt and the torture that we put ourselves through mentally and physically, was exactly the same, no matter what the circumstances were. So thank you to the Hope Shot for bringing this community together and unifying it. So I guess most of the time when we start telling our stories, we talk about childhood. And for me, it's the easiest just to do some chronological things and talk about some crap that happened in my life. So, going back as young as I can remember, I was the girl who never felt like she fit in, right? And I love when I hear a speaker start with that, because I instantly know I'm in the right place, right? So I had that mental turmoil, go to this group and try and fit in and become like them. And when but my brain was always telling me, like, you don't fit, like, they don't like you, you're not good enough. So then you go to the next group and the next group. And this is really where I learned, like, to put a mask on. In like every different scenario, I was wearing a different mask, you know. And another like primary mask that I really held on to through childhood was my father was an addict. And, you know, typical, you know, what you see in the life of an addict from a child's perspective. Drug dealers come to the house to fight for money, or coming home and items be missing from our house, and watching your dad get arrested in the front yard. Those were all things that I watched as a kid, and I promised I would never do that, right? I was never going to be that kind of person. You know, so I get into high school and I really start to realize, like, I am not academically smart. And it was showing in my grades, but I wanted to make sure that I was showing like a good appearance, like trying to compensate, right, for not being as book smart as everybody else. So I got super involved. That's the mask I wore. You know, I was in student government, I was in marching band, I was in, you know, different clubs. And partly because I wanted to stay away from home. My father had left, and it was just, my mom was working 2 jobs, you know, typical single mom, things going on. So I just wanted to stay busy, and I was trying to wear that mask of compensating for how I lacked in education. And so then my senior year of high school, I now know that I had, you know, like a mental break 6 months before graduation, and I dropped out of high school as the senior class president, as a member of the marching band, and super involved. I had like I was going through some mental stuff and just checked out. Pretty quickly after that, I ended up meeting a Marine. He was in the Marine Corps, got married, and moved to North Carolina. He had to do like right after we got married, he had to do a quick last minute deployment. He was gone for 3 months, the first 3 months of our marriage. And when he came back, we were great. You know, I truly felt like this was the person for my life. You know, I was going to grow old with this person. We were great communicators. We had everything that a relationship was supposed to have, at least at that time, what I thought a relationship should have. And we got quickly pregnant. And my husband's, of course, you know, my life, you know, the way things happened to me, I was due to give birth 3 days before my husband's due date. Or I'm sorry, due to give birth 3 days before my husband was going to go back to Afghanistan for the second time. And we went on a pre-deployment leave. We went to Pennsylvania and Jersey and saw some friends and family. And on the way back, I ended up going into labor. We stopped at a hospital and we, you know, delivered my daughter. And this is kind of where, you know, like Christina talked about, the shit in my life happened, right? But I want to go back and talk about like what drugs at this point like had been like in my life, right? Because I grew up never wanting to be an addict. And I grew up with all these thoughts of like, I don't fit in, I don't belong. And that my home life was so different than like everybody else, I thought, right? Because of my father and because of my single mom. But in high school, I did find those kids whose home life looked like mine. And those kids were doing drugs on the weekend, and they were using substances. And I remember the very first substance I ever put into my body, who I was with, what apartment I was in, and what exactly it was. And I just remember the feeling of like acceptance. That was the immediate feeling I felt. Like, this is turning off all those negative feelings. This is making me feel really good. I'm comfortable around these people now because of what I'm doing. And that just became a pattern. During the week, I was wearing the mask of like the good kid, all that stuff. And then on the weekend, I had a different set of friends, and those were who I was using with. You know, to go back forward, sorry to be jumping around, but to go back forward to the pregnancy, gave birth to my daughter at a random hospital, and she was born with a traumatic brain injury. And we spent quite some time in the hospital with her. During that hospital stay, we were given prognosis of, you know, the extent of her brain injury. We were told that she would probably never walk, never talk. We were given a spectrum, right? Like they said, like she could be as mild as like just having some developmental delays or like a limp or speech delays, or she could be as severe as, you know, never walking, never talking, never being able to be a what we would consider a normal atypical child. And we were given that when she was 3 days old. We were given that spectrum, and we had to make a choice at that time whether we were going to terminate care and let nature take its course, or if we were going to keep her on life support and let her fight. And we made the decision with the help of our family, and we chose to keep her on the life support. And through the hospital visits, we learned more and more that we were leaning more towards the spectrum of the higher severity of it. And my daughter ultimately, you know, never walked, never talked, was wheelchair bound, G-tube dependent, you know, all the medical complexities that you could have. And I'd say in that moment, like with my relationship with my husband, like we had grown like stronger in that moment. There wasn't much substance abuse, even though my husband had previous substance abuse. That really was kind of like a life trigger for us. Like we're young, we're in our 20s, but we need to figure this out because this is serious and we need to get life on track. But with that, like with having a medically fragile child, with having a traumatic birth and delivery, it was very traumatic. There were people at fault, and a lot of things that went wrong. So, you know, the shame and the guilt, you know, kind of sets in, and your self-worth is in question. And, you know, every time you look at this product of a traumatic incident and see the effects that it has on her life, you know, it just, you go through the grief, like you're grieving the life that you thought you were going to have. You know, the child and the family and the school and the soccer and the minivan, you know, all those things. And, but I stayed steadfast, and I fell into that habit that I did in high school, right? Like I had all this, I was failing somewhere in my life. Like I thought I was failing. So I need to show up in other ways, right? So I, excuse me, I showed up, and I, you know, was a great special needs mom, and I organized nurses, and I took her to therapy, and I was, you know, I would go overboard, you know, over the top. I was making sure that we were checking every box and we were doing everything that we could. But ultimately, her health just continued to decline. The simplest of cold would put her in the hospital. And we made, you know, after about a year of back and forth from the hospital and on life support, you know, bringing her back to life and back on life support, all these things, you know, we made the decision with her medical team to place her on hospice in this was 2014. And she lived on hospice at home for 7 months, and she passed away at home. And making that decision, right? I remember the minute she took her last breath, right? Because I'm watching the clock in front of me. There's a nurse in front of me on the ground, and I'm holding her, and I'm counting the seconds. And I was really fixated at the time on like the exact time of death. And I remember the minute she took her last breath and the nurse confirmed it, just saying, "Don't you dare cry. Don't you dare get upset," right? Because that shame and that guilt, and that blame was still there. Like I struggled behind the scenes for 3 long years. My daughter passed away at 3 years old, just after her 3rd birthday. And that all just dropped like a rock, you know? And I instantly became numb. I remember instantly not caring about anything. I instantly remember the horrible thoughts I was telling myself in my head, right? And so we go through the procedures, and we we lay her to rest and we do the service and people come to the house and refrigerator's full of food. And like, all I want to do is just go back to using that substance because I remember how so good it felt, right? Like I have nothing holding me back now. Like I have no responsibilities. I'm middle fingering the entire world right now, right? Because the way I looked at it at the time was I had chose 3 years prior to let this child live. And 3 years later, I chose to let her die, right? That was my mindset. Because, you know, from being at the hospital a lot, we saw other kids and other parents who were fighting so hard, you know, to keep their kids alive through whatever they were going through. And here we are, like, oh, we're just going to put our child on hospice. You know, I felt like I was giving up and I felt like I wasn't fulfilling the role of being a mother. So we get through all the procedural things. We moved to a different house because I couldn't be in that home. Moved to a different house. I got a job 22 days after she passed away. I was a stay-at-home mom her whole life. And, you know, I kept telling myself, like, you just have to keep moving forward. Don't sit in this too long. You're the one to blame. You know, those are just the repetitive thoughts. And so my husband and I are in our mid-20s now, and I was 23. He was 25. And we're doing what all of our friends are doing. We're building connections with people who are doing what normal people do, right? We completely 180'd our life from being responsible, you know, productive members of society to completely losing our minds on the weekends and trying to sustain some sort of life. And in the beginning, it was all fun. You know, we hear that a lot. In the beginning, it was all fun. But there was still, like, my husband wouldn't talk about it. My husband wouldn't share he's a Marine. He's not going to do those fluffy feeling things, right? He's going to suck it up and he's going to move on. While there were some breakthrough moments where, like, I definitely need to call his battle buddies and be like, hey, come figure this out. Come talk to him. You know, same for me. You know, there were breakthrough moments where I just exploded, you know, and had complete mental breakdowns. But we're using more and more and more and more. And now I'm getting to the point where, like, I'm substituting one for the other. Like, this one's getting me through the day, but, like, now I got to go to work. And then somebody introduced me to something that was going to help me get my shit back together. And then now I've done that and I can't go to sleep. So I'm doing something else, you know, and it was just one thing after another. And, you know, 7 years later, I'm looking at my life. My husband and I are a wreck. There's cheating and there's manipulation and we're falling apart and we're never grieving at the same pace. And I blamed him for never externally showing how he felt and making me feel so isolated in the feelings about what happened to us. And, you know, I wake up one day and life's just completely different. Life's completely unmanageable. COVID happened. I'm using my substances all day long. I'm separating myself from my family, separating myself from my friends. I remember going on a camping trip and I sat in the truck the entire time, using and reading a book because I wanted to escape reality. I wanted to escape where I was. And here I am supposed to be having a good time with friends. And that was something I remembered a lot heavily. So towards the end, my husband left me. I remember he came into me in the living room and I'm sitting on the couch and I'm blitzed. And he says, you know, you got to get your shit together. What's going on? And I just remember him screaming and yelling and saying all the things, right? And all I could think in the moment was like, just leave because you're the last thing. You are the last thing holding me here. You're the last string. Just leave. But I didn't. I stayed quiet the whole time. He packed a bag and he left. And those 3 weeks, for 3 more weeks, I was just trying to hold myself together. My mom didn't even know I didn't tell my mom he left. Didn't tell anybody that he wasn't at home. So 3 weeks later, I decided that I had no strings left here, that I had failed miserably at life. all my dreams and aspirations were gone. And I was so fixated on the cycle of these substances I was having to use to just make it through. And I tried to end my life. And fortunately, praise God, I failed miserably. And I looking back on the moment, I can say it was nothing but a spiritual moment. It was fully guided by some higher power that's way bigger than me, because somehow I ended up, and I knew nothing about recovery, right? My dad was never part of it. I knew AA from like movies and TV shows, but at this point, I didn't think I was an addict. This whole time, I don't think I have a problem. I blamed everything on the PTSD. I blamed everything on the mental health. I didn't think I had a drug problem, right? So I'm Googling how to treat PTSD, I find this treatment facility in Ocala who treats co-occurring substance, PTSD treatment center with co-occurring substance abuse. And I was like, I'll go there, right? Because they're trauma-based. They have all these trauma, programs. And I go, and I'm terrified. I'm completely terrified. I'm numb. I don't know what to expect, but I had a desperation that I never wanted to go back there, right? The gift of desperation, that was the higher power moment, just set in, wake up. What are you doing? Right? What are you doing with your life? And it was amazing, that feeling and that moment I got to have where I figured out what the next steps were. I felt like it gave me a drive. It was the first time I had a step to take, right? So I go to this treatment facility, I go through detox. I'm an addict. I went through detox, and that was really holy cow, this is unmanageable. I am dependent on this. Thanks, Dad, or, whatever. That were my thoughts at the time. And when I got out into the program, obviously I did a lot of trauma work, but I was introduced to recovery, right? And I'm dumbfounded. I don't know anything about it. And I was fortunate enough to have a therapist who was in recovery, and it was a part of my healing and a part of the work I was doing there. And when I would talk about how isolated I felt and how unique I was, right? And how I was me, poor me, he'd be like, why don't you go pick up that book and read it? And the book was part of a recovery program. And I started reading the stories, and I started, reading the front of the book, and these people think like me. People wrote this book and they think the way I think, and they felt the way I felt. Yeah, everything was leading up to that was unique. Their circumstances were unique, but we all talked the same to ourselves. We all thought the same. And that was the hope shot. That was my first hope shot, that I was in the right place at the right time with the right literature and the right therapist. And I have nobody to thank today but a higher power, right? And so something that they promised me in this rehab treatment center was, if you left and you went to a 12-step program and you raised your hand, you said you were new and that you needed help, that you'd never have to go back to feeling the way that you felt. And let me tell you, the gift of desperation was all over me, and I was ready to do whatever it took, and so I did. I got out and I went to the meetings. I was scared shitless. All these people were happy and go lucky and sharing gratitudes. And I'm like, I just left a treatment center where we talked about trauma for 6 hours a day. I am raw. I am exposed. I want to tell you how awful my life is. I was the newcomer who was like, look at me. My life sucks. Screw all of you. Why am I here? And then I was following the suggestion of getting a sponsor, right? And I was fortunate that God had put some people in my life in a previous job who worked this program. And so they were there to give me a little bit of a crutch, right? And they guided me to this one woman who had some similar stories, mental health struggles as me. And she said, why don't you just try listening to what we have to say? you know? And I'm like, okay, I can try that. You know, they say take the, what is it, the cotton out of your ears and put it in your mouth, you know? So I did all that and I started listening. I'm like, these people are broken just like I am, right? Because all I heard was the gratitude, but I didn't hear about the shit they went through before they realized the gratitude. And so I was like, okay, I can do this. I can do this. About 6 months clean. I called an addict. I crashed my truck. And I called another addict and I'm like, you lied. This program's not for me. Life still sucks. Not knowing what life on life's terms was and thinking that I could conquer the whole world with this recovery on my back. I got the sponsor. I'm doing, you know, service work. I'm going into treatment facilities. I got a little bit of time under my belt. I'm reading the literature. And then I crashed my truck and I blame, you know, everybody, blame recovery, right? And again, I got some strength and hope and wisdom from the women in recovery. You know, so my journey since then has just been, you know, I ended up getting a divorce while I was in treatment, coming out and not having anywhere to live. I chose the route of just staying with a friend until I can get a room to rent, and that worked for me. And you know, just like one day looking at my apps on my phone and I'm like, oh, Credit Karma, wonder what that looks like now, you know, and my credit score is super high. Okay, well, I guess I should buy a house, you know, 6 months clean, bought a house and never expected it. And it was a complete God moment. It was the first house I looked at. It's definitely a blessing and a miracle of what recovery can do for us. And I just started living my life. I had gained so much self potential in recovery, self confidence in recovery, that I had the strength of leaving my job that I had for 8 years, where I worked up the ladder in management, and I still told myself, like, you can't take these skills and apply them to another job. This is unique. You can't. You're gonna be stuck here. You're gonna have to learn something totally new. But I was able to take those skills and management and all of that and come into the county and work in local government and do management and processing. Total God moment, right? I wouldn't have had that faith or that hope or that confidence to leave a job and be able to apply my skills somewhere else. And so I've got the job, I've got the recovery, I'm doing the steps, right? And I'm not doing them as quickly as I'd like, right? You know, I'm still struggling with my mental health. I still need that outside help, right? I went through a period of time where my medications were not okay, and I needed some help guiding that. And getting into service, man, I got into service, and the reason I got into service was because I need to look at somebody else so I don't look at myself, right? Like, I don't want to look at my problems because we're doing enough digging in the step work. Like, let me focus on somebody else. Let me get into service, right? And then it became kind of like, you know, people pleasing, like we did in active addiction. Like, I'm doing this for you, you know, to gain something from it, whether it's, you know, to gain your respect or your recognition or your acknowledgement, something, right? And then quickly, like, as I advanced in the service levels, like, our predecessors like humbled me, right? They shared with me their strength and their wisdom, and sometimes directly, and sometimes it was just, you know, just by watching how they presented themselves and how they carried themselves and how they talked and how much they were respected and how selfless they were, right, in doing service. So as I went into the region level of service with my program, I got to learn how to do that, right? We're not perfect people. I'm still practicing today, you know, the principles that will help us be productive members of society, let alone in a service position. But that was kind of like the transition for me in my service. Like, I went into that super humble and remembering the purpose, right? It's just to help another addict, right? It sounds like we do a bunch of business and we talk about money and we talk about positions, but ultimately, when you trickle down to the groups, to the nightly meetings that people are showing up, like, there's intent and there's purpose, right? You know, my higher power, reconnecting with my higher power through step work. Through my journey, I don't ever want to say that I like backdoored. Like, I never hated my higher power. I had kind of an understanding, you know, from going to church in high school, again, it was another mask I wanted to wear so people didn't look at me. I went to church and I gained some perspective of what a higher power was. And when things had happened in my life, I never pointed blame. I just was like, okay, you sit down. I got this. This is my problem. I caused this. I'm going to fix it. You just sit over there and let me handle it. Right. And that led up into my recovery. And when I got to work the steps and start to build that relationship with a higher power, you know, the questions and the literature really dove into like what a higher power is really supposed to be to us, right? And how, you know, our will versus their will, and understanding that we are not the one all be all, and we do not have all of the answers, and life is so much easier if you just hand it over, right? And I try to do that on a daily. I'm like, man, this employee, I'm going to come out kickboxing in my office. All right, God, take it, you know, and then just take a moment, deep breaths. And as long as I just say, okay, God, take it, you know, I feel better. You know, I don't have to act out on, on behaviors and stuff today. So, yeah, the recovery is amazing. I'm so blessed. I'm so fortunate. You know, my relationship with my family's getting better. You know, I'm making amends where I need to. I'm working on that step now, and God willing, with just one day at a time. September 7th of this year, I'll have 4 years, and I really, I'll close with this, but I really hold on to the gift of desperation that I have. I have a very clear image of that very last day, that very last moment, and that feeling of relief when I felt like I found my next step, right? And I go back to that. You know, I still have the thoughts sometimes like, are you sure you're an addict? You know, because I never lost like material things. I never lost material things. I lost my mind. I lost my family. I lost my husband. I never lost material things. I wasn't my dad, right? I wasn't pawning crap, you know? And I didn't have drug dealers. I had friends who sold me drugs, their drugs, right? So sometimes those feelings still creep in, and that's my addiction, right? That's my addiction telling me again that you're just wearing another mask. You're in this program just playing another fake person. And today, because of the programs and because of recovery, I know I don't have to listen to those thoughts, right? Just because I think them doesn't mean they're true. Doesn't mean I have to act out on them. You know, try and tell me that 4 years ago, I'd have been like, no, like everything that goes on in my head, fact. Right? Check the box. I'm that person, right? So now when those fleeting thoughts come in, or, you know, I went to go with my family to an Italian restaurant. I'm like, some wine would go really good with this dinner, right? Fleeting thoughts, they come in and they go. You know, and I had a fleeting thought today, you know, and I don't want to share on it, but it had to do with a material that we used to use. And it was a fleeting thought. And I texted my sponsor. I said, can you believe what I just thought about? You know, do you know the last time that I did that? You know, and but it felt good to like not tell on myself, but like share that with somebody who gets it, and not have to sit in it and degrade myself, right? Shame on you for thinking that way. That's what I totally would have done previously. And something I said I closed with the other thing, but I'm finally going to close with this. A fleeting thought, not a fleeting thought, an intuition, not an intuition. A thought I had this week during a meeting was just because of the I had a rough week, and I found out some things like about my husband moving on, right? And so I get a little emotional. Some things were going on the inside, and I had like an epiphany in a meeting when somebody was sharing, like, I don't have to degrade myself because of the feelings that I'm having. And I got to have a conversation with my sponsor afterwards about it. And she told me to welcome my feelings like it was a friend asking for help, because that's ultimately what our feelings are doing. Poof, completely blew my mind. You know, the relationship that we have, she knows what's going to get through to me. I put complete trust in her, and that's something that now we get to have the dialogue. And now I know just this week that I don't have to downplay my feelings or blame myself for the feelings I'm having, that I just need to figure out why I'm having them and work on that. So I think that's all I got.
Tips. You guys, listen,
Thank you.
that's awesome. I still listen. I hold on to that thought, that feeling, that gift of desperation.
Yeah.
Every time I'm coming up on my celebration, and you're about to come up on your
Yes.
celebration, so I remember the days. Like, I have a countdown. I'm like, oh, I remember exactly where I was at this time, and I can remember even 7.5 years later, I still remember exactly the way I felt, because I never want to go back.
Yeah.
I never want to, or think, yeah, I'm not all my thoughts, but my thoughts could tell me, man, be a good idea. Hey, you see that ketamine? You feel a little depressed, don't you?
Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah.
My mind will play tricks on me and have me thinking that maybe, just maybe, I could be that guy or whatever. But as long as I can remember what it felt like to try to be that guy,
Yeah.
I'll never have to go back to that. And that's what I express that to everybody I talk to. If you never forget it, man, you'll never go back,
Right.
Always
Right.
remember.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I love that fleeting thought. I remember when I was like 9 months into recovery, right? I was the happiest probably I had ever been. I still hadn't gotten my kids back yet, but I had a car and I was driving, being able to drive and see them. And I would drive back from Claremont and I would be like, oh, I should pull in and see so-and-so, or I should pull into the gambling place. And I would be like, whoa. And I would be like, what is wrong with you? Why would you even consider, like, life is so good. Why would you even consider doing something that could blow your life up? And then I was in a meeting and somebody had shared about how we don't have control over the initial thought.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the initial thought just pops in there, but we have control over the next one. And that was so freeing to me, because I was able to separate myself from that initial thought. Right? Because me, I'm thinking that stuff. That's how, those are my feelings. Those are my ideas.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Like, what is wrong with me that I'm considering doing that? And when I heard that, I was able to just, so when they pop in, I'd be like, nope. And I can just detach myself from it.
And I can go back and think of like all the times that I had heard in the rooms, like some kind of comment about, our feelings and how we need to embrace them or whatever, but I didn't hear it till I needed to hear it. Right. And it sounds like, I'm sure you can attest to how many times you had heard somebody talk about those fleeting thoughts in a meeting, but you didn't hear it till you didn't hear it. Right. And so when you get into these meetings and you go to these rooms and you have predecessors or even newcomers who have the willingness to just speak up and share what's on their heart, it's constant reminders for us. I see somebody in the group chat like, thank you, I needed that reminder. Right? We probably hear these things all the time. We read it in the literature, we do it in the steps, but our higher power lets us hear it and ingest it and digest it when we need it, which is amazing.
Yeah, we have built-in forgetters. You know what I mean? We have this thing that likes to forget what it was like.
Yeah.
Or listen, we always say those cliches, those things we're like, that's stupid as fuck, but we're like, and now we're in recovery, like, now you're saying them, like in the beginning, you were like, oh, here he goes again with that damn saying. And they're true. You know what I mean? When you start walking this thing out and you start living this program, that's when the things are starting to, those cliches that you thought were so retarded and like, like you were saying in the beginning, like, oh, it's stupid gratitude.
Yeah.
It starts becoming your world, and then you start speaking it, and then you're like, oh, it just makes sense. And then as I'm speaking, I'm like, see, here I am. And it's like, I'm telling people like my predecessors were telling me, and it's all coming to fruition because I'm walking this thing out like I'm supposed to.
That's the hope shot.
That's the hope shot, baby.
Yeah, you have such an amazing story. I remember when the first time when you had shared a little bit about your story, and it was right near the time that I had lost my brother. And, my brother was battling cancer, and he was my baby brother. And we went home from the hospital on hospice. They gave him a week to live, and he lived 7 weeks. And I just remember like it just being, I still grieve from that. It was probably the most devastating thing I've ever been through. And what it's done is like, it's actually numbed me, because all the losses that I've experienced since then, I'm just like, oh, that's life. You know what I mean? Because that was so devastating to me. And I remember like every day just kind of, and I said, you waited like 7 months? You said that she was on hospice?
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
7 weeks felt like a lifetime, and it was so mind boggling, because like one day they're horrible, and the next day they look like, oh, maybe they're not dying, and they have energy and they're up walking around, at least my brother. And it was the worst thing I ever been through. And I remember after I had lost him, and then you had shared, and it just put things in perspective, because I remember thinking, wow, she lost her daughter, and I mean, I was hurting for my baby brother, but then it was like, she lost her daughter, so it just, it gave me a little bit, in a weird way, it gave me a little bit more strength. Like, she's getting through it, I can get through it. This is what it's all about. We share how we get through shit, know. And yeah, you just have an amazing story. You got to keep telling that story and helping people, because it truly is an inspirational story. And I'm so glad that you had that higher power moment, and that you knew that next step to take. And I remember that relief. I remember when I first walked in to sober living, and I think it was the first time in a year that I exhaled.
Yeah.
And, I'm watching her make my bed with some white sheets. And I remember, I get to sleep in a twin bunk bed tonight. I might as well have been at the Ritz.
Yeah.
She was making my bed, and I was able to sleep on the bottom bunk of a bunk bed. And I just remember, like, my stuff was out on the porch. I wasn't worried about anybody stealing it. If they stole it, whatever. I was just like that moment where I was like, I'm in the right place. I'm okay. I'm safe,
Yeah. And to go back and talk about like the purpose that we can find in the things that hurt us the most, right? And that's probably one of the greatest gifts that I ever got from recovery. Because if you had told me when I first got here that I was going to find purpose in all the crap that I had gone through in my life, especially my daughter passing away, I probably would have hit you. Like, how dare you say that, right? That there's purpose. But I worked through that. I worked through that with my sponsor, and I probably went a whole year without telling anybody outside of my sponsor, not in my shares. I would say something traumatic happened, and then, blah, 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 blah. I would never straight up say it. And she's like, well, why don't you just try and go to a meeting and just share about it? I was coming up on the anniversaries of her birthday and passing, which are really close. And so, of course, I went to the smallest meeting I can find. I knew like what meeting nobody went to. And I showed up to that meeting, and an addict that I know from doing service from the Bay Area came down from St. Pete, was there because her husband's in recovery. She wanted to bitch about him. So she came down to us. And so she was there on a whim, and she was with a friend. She brought a friend with her. And that was the meeting where I very first said, like, my daughter died, and this is the result of that. And that's what drove my addiction. And I talked about like being a special needs mom and things like that. And this woman that came with my friend from St. Pete was a special needs mom who in active addiction and in recovery, who, related to all of the feelings that I had. And so right there, the uniqueness went out the window. That was my, like, you're not alone, right? Like, I was like, okay, there's one of me in these rooms, and I'm good, right? And then I had a friend, growing up, a childhood friend who had a very late term miscarriage and had to give birth to her stillborn. And we were just like, so at that time, social media acquaintances, but I got to message her and be like, I validate everything you're feeling. All those posts you're talking about, calling yourself a piece of crap, valid. Like I hear you. You're not wrong in like you're wrong in thinking those things, but it's natural for you to think those things, right? And she too was a product of an addict and had been doing some, you know, family programs like Al-Anon or something like that, and to try and come to terms with some stuff, and so I got to be a voice, like a shoulder, like a relating person. Like, I understand what you're feeling. Like, you know, don't push yourself. When people say, I know, you know, I could only imagine. Well, I do. Like, I had it. It's not an imagination. I'm here with you, you know, and that gave me purpose too. And like, just sitting back, like after some of those conversations I had with her and being like, you know, praising God, you know, my higher power, thanking him for finally revealing like some purpose. Like, it's really crappy purpose when you look at like what the loss was. But it and I'm only 33. Like, I got my whole life of living out this purpose and living out the ability to just share my experience with people. So I love that recovery's given me that.
Yeah, and it's cool because we always talk about one addict helping another. We're one human helping another. You know, that's what I've learned in this recovery life is, man, we're some blessed people. We are some straight God-given, grace, blessed, like all of that, because we have been given this gift that most people may never see in their lifetime. Never. You know, the gift of helping or seeing another human being and be able to give them an experience, you know, because we've become self-aware about our humanness, you know, our human, you know, and it's pretty awesome. I don't know about you, but it is pretty awesome to be able to experience that and be able to share that with other human beings and other people struggling and let them know that they're not alone, you know, and it's magical, man, what we can do with another human being, connect on that level, you know, in the times of suffering, you know.
Yeah.
So
right there with
that's
you.
cool. Yeah. Well, I appreciate you, Trish, coming on here tonight.
Thanks.
It's been such a refreshing to hear a story and for what you've been through and what you got through and you do have plenty of life. You have plenty of life and thank you for your service in our you know, in our world, in our fellowship, on the main up on region level. That's where all the business and finance and all the boring stuff flows down. You're right. So yeah, I appreciate you coming on here tonight.
Thanks so much, guys. Glad to be here.
All right. Well, thank you guys. You want to say something?
No, I was just wondering, we had some people doing some shout outs. Usually we say hi to some people. Do we have any?
Yeah,
people?
I put it on screen. So
oh,
you know.
Okay. All right, that's fine.
I had it on the screen. Man. It's like double dipping. I will just for you. How's that? Okay. We got Tiffany says, thank you so much for sharing. You are truly an inspiration. We got Chrissy. I'm double dipping. Chris says, wow, it's a new feature they put on here. So I'm like, let me check that out. Chris says, wow, thank you so much for sharing. I picked a great night to hop on here. Thank you. And we have Sky says, great job. Glad you are part of the recovery community.
Thank you.
And again, Denise says, you just gave me a good reminder. Thank you. We got Matt says, thank you, Trish. You're an amazing person, and thank you for all your service and honesty tonight.
Love you, Matt.
Matt's going to come on in 2 weeks, just to let y'all know.
Send me a reminder, Matt.
Nice.
Yeah.
Matt's on my gratitude list. Well, I've been slacking, but Matt picks it up every day.
He's on mine too. And and then Katie says, I still have those thoughts, but then I'm like, where the fuck did that even come from?
Yeah.
No, that's not a horrible idea. No, that's a horrible idea.
Yeah.
So that
those fleeting thoughts, man.
Yeah. Well, thank you all so much for being here tonight. And in 2 weeks, we'll have Matt sharing his story.
Cool.
little teaser for you. But next week we'll be on here sharing about some topics. We don't know what it's going to be, but it's going to be something cool. I hope. Anyways, right, Christine?
And I'll see you in a few weeks. Like, what is it? 4 weeks away? 3 weeks away? 4 weeks away?
Yep.
Well,
See you
we'll
soon. We're getting into the heavy part of the year, so
thank you so much. You did such a great job. Did such
love
a great
you guys.
job. Love you.
All right.
Bye.
Peace, guys. Bye.